Welcome. Good afternoon. I'm Emily Mello, Mayor's Senior Director of Learning and Public Programs at the Museum of Contemporary Art. Before we begin, please take a moment to turn off your cell phones unless you are using it for captioning. Thank you all for coming to this conversation between artist Willie Cole and Associate Curator Jadine Collingwood. And thank you also to our generous funders, a full list of whom you can see here on this slide. While it is always a good time to gain further insights into an artist of such innovation and imagination as Willie Cole, this conversation is held on the occasion of the MCA's Descending the Staircase and his work, Hybrid Casco GE, in the MCA's collection, which you can see on view in the exhibition. Descending the Staircase is part of an ongoing exhibition series that highlights key artists represented in the MCA's collection, and it's curated by Jadine and Jack Schneider, assistant curator. I hope you'll take some time to see it if you haven't already. It's on the 3rd and 4th floor stairway galleries. It draws its title from Duchamp and focuses on novel and innovative approaches to representing the body. You will see how really amazing point of entry Willie Cole's work is into the themes in the exhibition, but so much more. It's so layered, and we really are just thrilled to have an artist who has been working in such inventive ways for so many years and continues to find new ways to look at the world around us and help us to see it differently. And so now I'm thrilled to introduce Willie Cole. Willie Cole is best known for assembling and transforming ordinary domestic and used objects such as irons, ironing boards, high-heeled shoes, hair dryers, bicycle parts, wooden matches, lawn jockeys, and other discarded appliances and hardware into imaginative and powerful works of art and installations. Through the repetitive use of single objects in multiples, Cole's assembled sculptures acquire a transcending and renewed metaphorical meaning or become a critique of consumer culture. Cole's work is generally discussed in the context of postmodern eclecticism, combining references and appropriation ranging from African and African-American imagery to Dada's ready-mades and surrealism's transformed objects. Cole grew up in Newark, New Jersey. He attended Boston University School of Fine Arts and received a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the School of Visual Arts in New York in 1976 and continued his studies at the Art Students League of New York from 1976 to 1979. Cole has been in over 60 exhibitions, and I imagine that number's even grown since then, since that estimate, including solo presentations at Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University, the David C. Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland, Montclair Art Museum, University of Wyoming Art Museum, the Bronx Museum of the Arts, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. He's the recipient of many awards, including the 2006 winner of the David C. Driscoll Prize awarded by the High Museum of Art. Cole's work is found in numerous private and public collections and museums around the world, and I'm just going to name a few: the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and the Yale University Art Gallery in New Haven. Please join me in welcoming Willie Cole and Jadine Collingworth to the stage.
Well, hello. Thank you all for coming out on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. And I wanted to just say thank you to Willie for making your way to Chicago. I know it was a slightly complicated flight given everything that was going on with the airports. So we're really, really happy to have you here. Yes. And so I thought, maybe by way of starting, as Emily was saying, we kind of invited you on the occasion of this exhibition, Descending the Staircase, which includes one of your kind of earlier works, from 1982, this piece that you see here, Hybrid Casco GE. So I'm wondering if by way of starting, you could kind of, take us back to the 90s, what you were kind of doing then, what were you listening to, what were you thinking about, and maybe how did some of that come to influence how you were thinking about this work?
Thank you all for being here. All my stories are long, so you can cut me off whenever you're ready.
Okay, no worries.
So in the 80s, in New York and in New Jersey, or in my circle of friends, there were so many African Americans who were suddenly practicing Yoruba, or they were either Akan. These are two groups of people in West Africa with specific religious practices. So, and my best friend at the time was an African art dealer. He lived about a block from where I lived. He and I were the only people up all night long. So we spent a lot of time together. And one day, I found a steam iron on the street that had been run over by a truck or a car, and it looked like an African mask. I brought it into the studio and took a lot of Polaroids of it, hung them around the studio, and it began to inspire me to make more things out of irons, but the aesthetic had to be African. So this piece is in a pose that reflects that. I call these the power poses. You see them in museums of African art. Kneeling, squatting, presenting breasts, carrying babies, things like that. So my intention was to see these as power figures, and because they're irons, the evidence of their power became the scorch. So that's what I did not exclusively, but that's what I showed exclusively for about 10 years with that trajectory.
Yeah, and I'm interested in this, what has become kind of a staple of your practice, which is, repurposing found materials.
Right.
And so can you talk a little bit about that, sort of how that has kind of played through your practice?
Yes, found materials came to me because when I got out of school, I was an illustrator and a graphic designer. I worked for the city of New York as a designer. Then I worked for a company in Jersey doing computer graphics, but then I got fired. And when I got fired, I could not afford paint and canvas. So I started working with found materials. That's how it came about. This piece is made from steam irons, but this whole journey began with taking a single iron and taking it apart and reassembling it into something else. I called it at that time archaeological ethnographic Dada, because I'm very inspired by Duchamp, and I would find, if there was a fire, say in the city of Newark, I could go to that site, and I would always find a steam iron, a telephone, and an ironing board. Okay. So that was, it was almost like ethnographic studies for me at the time.
Yeah. I'm interested in that kind of relationship too, because you're taking these everyday, kind of domestic objects, which certainly have their own kind of resonances and connections. Of course, I think of the home. I think of labor. I think especially labor typically associated with women's work, right. And then that being paired with this kind of larger context of thinking about the ethnographic. How are you thinking about that?
Well, the first thing I did when I found one on the street is I made a list of everything it suggested to me. I kind of believe that sometimes knowledge closes the door on learning because you think you know everything. Like if I say there's just a chair there, I would never recognize it as wood, So I made a list with the iron, and I got the color silver, I got the color black. And the word black, just has so many things. So that went right to Africa and people of color. And that, of course, went to the slave trade. Mm-hmm. So I go up a few years from there. I'm in the antebellum period. But then I am thinking about my great-grandmother who worked as a domestic. Mm. So that all came into play. Another part of that story is that in my family, in 5 generations, only 2 males were born. So I had a bunch of broken irons for many years. It was my job to fix them, for my mother actually. And I wasn't successful at that. I threw them all away. But then a year later, I saw this one on the street, and it just made me Iron Man, I guess.
Yeah. So speaking about that, so you've used the iron. This work is from '92, but I think we have some images too of more recent works, like this piece, which you made in 2020.
Right. This, let's say, I started scorching in 1988.
Okay.
I was an artist in resident at Studio Museum in Harlem. And I smoked up the building. They asked me not to do it anymore. So I started doing this figurative pieces instead, and scorching in my studio in New Jersey. But I had a show at the Museum of Modern Art that was all about scorching. And at that point, I guess I was seeing a museum as a house of the past. So I said, okay, well, I guess scorching is dead. So I stopped for a while, but one of my collectors thought that it was a great time to continue now that I had this show at MoMA. And again, that was like 1990. But I still have ideas for it. And like most things that I do, I feel that they extend beyond their introduction in the world. Like the one here on your right, looks like a crown. I wouldn't have made that shape in 1988. You know? So it's still a growing thing for me. These ironing boards are because the first ones that I made got damaged, and my dealer asked me to make more. But since they require so much preparation, I said, I'll just keep making them until I get tired of it. So I made like maybe 10 more during the pandemic. The piece you showed previously, though, was because a New York Times critic said that all my scorches represent various skin tones of black people.
Yeah.
And I never thought of that.
So it came after you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that made me make that piece, the previous image that he showed.
Yeah. Can we go back to say your name?
One more. I was going to say Uno Mas, but one more.
Yeah,
right
here.
there.
Say my name. This piece, and I think we have a little bit of video of the making that maybe we can.
So
play.
accepting that critic's opinion about the scorches representing color tones, skin tones of people of color or black people, I thought, because of the George Floyd thing going on in our world at that time, that I would make grids of all the people who had been killed in police custody. Not realizing they were like millions of them. I didn't want to go past the 70s, but there were so many of them. So this has 88 faces on it. Each one has a name of the person underneath. And I've made 3 of them so far, but it's going to be challenging. You know.
Yeah, it's a never-ending
And it's a
work.
growing thing.
Yeah. And I'm so interested too in just the way that even this like simple motif of the iron, is able to kind of open up into so many symbolic associations.
Yeah, it's been interesting because now every time somebody sees a work of art with an iron, they think of me. And most people now, at least that I speak to regularly, they associate the iron with the transatlantic slave trade and experience of black people beyond that. So in a way, I did the iron a favor too. So it's been good.
Yeah, and then you have the piece Beauties, these works, which are actually prints. Can you talk a little bit about even just how these are made?
Yes. So these were made at High Point Editions in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I think there are 25 in total. But I don't like to know what I'm doing. As I said, sometimes knowledge closes the door for learning, for creativity and expansion. But because I had been who I call Willie the Scorch for so many years, as soon as I walk into the studio of a print shop, they have irons and ironing boards there for me.
Oh, already? They just
already.
they were like
someone to do that. Even if it was like 20 years past the ironing board prime, that still happens.
Okay.
Because they know they can sell that stuff, So, and I know they can sell, so I accept it. So with this project, we were able to get a lot of used irons from the local thrift stores, and I knew I wanted to use them as printing plates, so we had to flatten them out quite a bit. We surfed them down the hills to get them scratched up. We hammered them, we ran over them with the truck and everything until they were paper thin. And then we were able to just put them on the press bed and ink them up and run them through. I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know what it would say to me. But as soon as I saw them, I thought about the women in my own family who had worked as domestics and their friends. So each iron board has one of those kind of antebellum names like Fanny and Anime and names like that.
Named after people in your family?
Yeah, yes, yeah. After my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather's married 5 times. That's 5 iron boards right there.
Oh, okay.
And my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother was married 7 times. But that was during that period where the master said, marry Joe, and have a couple kids and that kind of thing. So I had a lot of names to choose from.
Yeah.
That's how it came about. It's one of my favorite pieces. There's a set of 5 that's been pulled out called a 5 Beauties Rising, which is in a lot of major collections now. But initially there were like 25 of them in one room.
Yeah, there's something really beautiful about all of the kind of traces of the marks. So it's fun. It's funny to hear you say that you were like throwing them down hills and stuff in order to get that, but they have a sense of wearing, I think.
Yeah, they have a lot of energy. Some people see them as headstones. Some people, because of previous work, they see them as slave ships. But I knew that they had a connection to the past and to women. So that's why I gave each one a name.
Beautiful. So I'm wondering maybe now would be a good time to kind of pivot a bit and talk about some of the works that you've been doing in relation to music.
Okay.
I think we have a video that maybe we can pull up of the piece Dial-A-Tune.
Oh, Dial-A-Tune, yes.
Yeah, maybe we'll play this and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. Well, I could say quite a few things. First, I would say that I made 2 of these pieces. This was in the studio, so it's kind of a work in progress. When I started, I thought that I could tune each guitar to a different chord, and it would play Around Midnight by Thelonious Monk.
Oh, wow.
But it didn't do that, because when I cut them, I changed something in the intonation of each string. So I was just glad to get sound.
Yeah.
But I plan to do a video of me playing along with it.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to that. The other thing is that my dealer in New York thought it should hang on the wall. I didn't really agree with her, but she hung it on the wall anyway.
Okay.
I mean, it looks pretty good upright, but I liked it better flat. So I'm still looking for that moment to make an actual performance with it and have it sitting on a table just playing like that.
Yeah.
I could say, I got 75 guitars from Yamaha.
Yes.
They have a program where they give imperfect instruments to grammar schools for kids to do paintings on.
Okay.
But when my daughter-in-law knew someone, part of that program, when they found out that her father-in-law was an artist, they said, we'll give him guitars. I got 75. And I spent the whole year making art just out of guitars.
Yes. Yeah, is that something that happens very frequently where like you're just the person that people drop materials off with?
Listen, I got an email from Ferragamo this morning.
Oh, really?
They want to collaborate on some project. They're probably going to send me like 100 pair of loafers or something.
Oh, nice.
About 6 months ago, I got 50 loafers from a company called Brazilian Loafers. So yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
I got a recycling award in my town. So every once in a while, I go to my front door, and there's a box there that contains steam irons and high-heel shoes.
Oh, nice.
So,
Yeah. So maybe we can go to some of the Yamaha pieces, these sculptures.
yeah, so I had to stay with my habit of single objectness. Like I said, I started with hair dryers, which was a single object multiplier, but when I got to steam irons, at some point it became taking one iron apart and using the pieces to it. And at some point I can tell you how that all came about too. But here with the guitars, I played the guitar, so cutting them up was not easy for me. I kept a couple a long time before I cut them up. But these pieces here are the leftover parts that I cut to make dial-a-tune.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's hard to throw stuff away.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's what the art, I've been told, is about, using things and not wasting things. But dial-a-tune was cutting up like maybe 26 guitars, and I cut the same shape off of each one, and this is made from that shape, those shapes.
And as you were saying, you also, play music. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, I think I find a kind of connection in a way between your own kind of approach to materials, the way that you're using found objects, the kind of repurposing of that, and jazz, for instance, the kind of improvisational nature of that, where you might take, a certain phrase and then you play around with it, extend it. How has that kind of
No, that's a fact, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, jazz, I'm born the same year as rock and roll, but I grew up listening to a lot of jazz because of my grandmother. And I had a friend who was a bass player for Dizzy Gillespie, and he said to me that improvisation is the reordering of learned information. And I feel that's what I'm doing with my sculpture as well. It's one of my favorites here. See, one is left-handed because I'm left-handed.
Okay. And maybe we can go to the project that you recently completed for the Kansas City International Airport. So this kind of major installation, which I actually had a chance to see really recently. I traveled to Kansas City for the first time this summer.
Yes.
And it's really, truly a kind of major epic moment.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I chose to make art out of hair dryers and out of steam irons, but they both came to me. I didn't have a plan like I'm gonna go out and get 50 steam irons. It just happened. So with these saxophones, I saw in a website called Call for Entries, which offers artists opportunities to apply for public art projects. So when I saw Kansas City, an airport, because I am a fan of jazz, I knew what I was going to make right away from that. Because Charlie Parker was born in Kansas City, and he plays the alto saxophone. So right away I knew what I was going to do. And of course, evidence here, I did get the commission. And I was lucky enough to get a real estate developer in Kansas City to give me a huge studio, like maybe twice this size. It used to be a theater in the 1920s, but it was abandoned. And he was on the verge of renovating it, but he hadn't started yet. So I was able to make these 12 birds from horns. So there are two different poses here in the airport. One is wings up, and one is wings back. And now people think I'm the artist who makes art out of instruments.
Okay, so you've had all these different lives of iron.
But what I'm really doing, I'm assigning each object that I use as a molecule or particle, and I believe, and I say believe, maybe I could say I am, but I am making art the same way that nature makes everything. Everything around us is made from a single particle, from the same particle, just multiplied. Maybe held together by a different rate of vibration, vibrational speed to make it look solid or translucent. Everything is vibration. And everything is singular. The ocean is not a big body of water. It's a lot of little dots, hanging out together. So the saxophone became my molecule. And that's how they came about.
Yeah, and you got like hundreds of these saxophones.
I purchased 300 new saxophones from China. And my first prototype required 30 horns per bird. But after 2 months of working, it ended up being 12 horns per bird. So I had a lot of horns left over. So I decided to stay in Kansas City an extra year and continue working with those horns. Partly because this is Kansas City energy. You know, it's like my studio in Kansas City, my current studio is right above a jazz club.
Oh, nice.
And I have three assistants, one kind of part-time, but they're all jazz musicians.
Okay.
And, you know, we take a break from the work and we break out the instruments and play. And I don't play a sax, but how can you own 300 horns and not blow one?
Yeah.
So these guys are trombonists and trumpet players, but I sit in with them and
Just
make noise, yes.
Yeah.
You know, I used to play the flute years ago in the 70s, so I have a basic idea of the fingering on saxophone.
Yeah, very nice. And so, you know, kind of moving from this piece, which is a major public art commission, but I know you've done so many,
Right.
you know, works in public spaces, and so I'm wondering if maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what it means for you to work in public space. Maybe we can pull up the pieces that the Chandelier pieces that you've done.
Well, working in public space is a way to allow the person who doesn't go to a museum or gallery to see the work. I mean, like in the city of Newark, where I grew up, a lot of people confuse the museum and the library. They've never been in either one of them, but they see them as the same. So that's why public art is important to me. Also, you know, the more eyes that go on the art, the better it is for me as an artist, because I make the art for myself, but my goal is to share it. So seeing it outside or in a public building is a plus for me. From a business point of view, like the Kansas City project was $500,000, but they didn't give me a check for $500,000. They gave me a little bit at a time, so it helps my life to continue, you know, because it's all stretched out. So I like public projects for that purpose, for that reason, but they're very competitive and hard to get. Every artist in the world is applying. Like Kansas City had probably like over 3,000 submissions worldwide for those projects.
And these, so what you're looking at, or maybe can you describe a little bit, because I don't know if you can tell me.
This piece is called the Liberty Lantern. This is 3,000 plastic water bottles, and they're on wires, 12-gauge galvanized steel wires, so it becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 12 rings of bottles, concentric circles, so that if it's not hanging, I can flatten it down to like a 2-foot tall crate by 6 feet, and easy to store that way. And I can tell you how these came about too. So I had an opportunity to show in a sculpture park in New Jersey, and I was excited about it. They have huge acreage. Then they have 3 buildings with galleries also, and I thought it was going to be outside. But once I got there, they told me I was going to be inside, and that they had no budget. So I was drinking water during the meeting and squeezing the bottle. I recognized that these bottles have lots of, you know, embossed lines in them, so they don't take a lot of space in the landfill. But in the hands of an artist, it was like origami. So during that meeting, I was able to squeeze the bottle down and turn it into a fish.
Wow.
And realize that, you know, I could probably make something out of these bottles. So that night, I know this sounds unreal, but this is a common experience for me. That night, I dreamed about a chandelier made out of water bottles, and there was a picture of Buddha in every chandelier. So my first chandelier was the Buddha chandelier, and that's how they came out. This is the remake of the Buddha chandelier.
And I think we have a video for that as well. I think these pieces, one of the things that's so beautiful about them is when you see them in movement.
Yes.
So
and when the lights, like, they have solar lights above them, so at night they light up.
Okay.
But in the daytime, the sunshine makes the transparency inside the bottle like a room of mirrors.
Can we?
I started making art out of chandeliers probably 12 years ago. It came from a dream. In a dream, I saw what I call the Buddha chandelier. It's kind of playing off of Herbert Hoover's statement about a chicken in every pot. So in my dream, it was a Buddha in every chandelier. And I can say now for the first time, I guess because of something, I said a Buddha in every chandelier. I meant to say a Buddha in every bottle.
Yeah.
Get more alliteration going.
Yeah. And so you can just encounter these kind of, on the streets.
Yes, they're along Park Avenue in New York, I think from 68th Street to 71st Street. And I wanted to do more, but I couldn't afford it. They called nobody's here from the Park Avenue Art Commission, right? They call it the Fund for Park Avenue, and they get artists to do projects, but they don't give you any money. They go to your dealer or your gallery and ask the gallery to pay for it, which my gallery did. So this is based on what they gave me. But I was fortunate enough to synchronize this with a residency at a place called Express Newark, kind of a makerspace. So they gave me money also, and I was able to make these 4 chandeliers.
Yeah. And I'm interested because, this kind of strategy of repurposing found materials has been kind of, ever present in your practice. But here it starts to take on, kind of maybe a different kind of resonance when you're using, reused water bottles.
Right.
So, of course, I think of, environmentalism. Not only that, but also a kind of way of retooling the way that we're valuing objects. So taking something that might be discarded, that we might consider to be no longer useful, and according attention to it. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that and how maybe has that kind of environmental angle kind of been kind of more attached to these works, or is it something that you've been interested in all along? Or?
Right. I would say my whole life, I'm not sure how it happened, because I know my dad was not as respecting of the earth, but I have never littered in my life. And I've always respected and loved nature. So I was environmentally conscious before that was a popular phrase. I didn't make these pieces to express that, but as I said initially, I couldn't afford paint and canvas and stretchers, so I started using found objects. So this is the most abundant found object on the planet. But it has evolved to where I get commissions from organizations that want to show their consciousness. And I was attracted to the bottle because of my experience turning it into a work of art during the meeting, but also the dream. But I came out of that dream thinking about, this is a plastic bottle, this is a vessel that has the potential to destroy life as we know it, but it's containing a fluid that makes life possible. And when you drink the water, you pour it in your mouth, your air goes in a bottle, so now your spirit is in a bottle. And that's why they have names like Spirit Catcher and Soul Catcher, names like that. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you were talking about, like, you've been kind of invited to do some commissions, and some of those have been kind of asked you to kind of engage with the local community.
Yes. Yeah, I've had a lot of commissions. Like, this is a commission.
Yeah.
This is in a corporate building downtown Newark, New Jersey. That widest ring is 8 feet diameter, and the whole thing might be about 8 or 10 feet tall. But that's public. I have private commissions too. Like, I don't know if you all probably know John Batiste, the pop musician. So he and his wife commissioned a chandelier for their home. And I have one in a movie theater in Pennsylvania. I have 2 in Columbia in public spaces. This is in the movie theater. That was the movie theater, yes. That one, he's fast. He just showed the one in John's house as well as the movie theater. Actually, it's a performance art space. It's not really a movie theater. They show movies there. I like it. They are often community-based. Even if the commissioning agent has not requested community-based, I do them with the help of lots of people. Because the first task is to put holes in the bottles. And that helps when you have people.
Yeah.
Because you got to do it one at a time. Psst, psst, psst. I burn the holes in with a soldering iron because the bottles are made to collapse. If I just hit them with a drill, they would mash down.
Okay.
So with a hot soldering iron, we just poke holes in thousands of bottles. Collecting the bottles becomes a community project, which has value in terms of education about the environment and things like that. Especially like I had a project at a school where I made a 30-foot tall seated male figure out of water bottles. And the kids collected all the bottles. Then they had to wash them and took the labels off. Then they had to put holes in. So it's like a classroom of like kids working nonstop. This is the result of that project here. So I like the engagement. Often in my studio, especially my studio, I live in New Jersey. So my studio in New Jersey, I'm often working alone. So this gets me out and working with people. And the work does not require a lot of thought, although it requires a lot of attention. So it allows me to become an educator for the masses at that moment.
Yeah.
I could show a video about the environment, or I could show my favorite movie, but they don't need to be distracted. They can easily just keep going. Psst, psst, psst,
It's so interesting that it's still like almost the iron is still making its way into how you make these works.
Yeah. So I like it a lot.
Yeah.
My current bottle collector is a good friend of mine who had a heart replacement. As a result of that, he has to drink like 20 bottles of water a day. So every few months, I call him up and I go there and pick up a bag of bottles. I currently have a shipping container in my yard that's filled from top to bottom with bottles.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we'll see many more works.
Well, it's interesting you say that. And I've been doing this a long time, and I was a painter and illustrator before I started doing this, and I kind of want to start doing that again. So I'm actually trying to get out of the water bottle business.
Okay.
I'm trying to get out of the shoe business.
Yeah.
I might keep the iron business because my project with the identity can go on forever.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm working too.
Yeah.
I want to get this down to just like a chandelier shop and take it commercial.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and that's happening. I mentioned earlier, I just got a commission from Mecca, which is a cosmetic store in Melbourne, Australia. And they want a chandelier to hang over the lipstick counter. So I want to do more things like that.
Yeah.
And because it is, for me, so formulaic at this time, I don't have to do it myself. I recently rented a new studio space just for that purpose, and I have 2 guys that work there. I come in and assemble the chandelier, but they're doing all that pre-labor for me.
Okay. Nice. And it's interesting because I feel like you've kind of very easily have moved between these two, the kind of commercial aspect of things. So you've done a number of collaborations with fashion designers.
Right.
One which is also incorporating shoes, but the project that you did for Comme des Garçons.
You know, as an artist, if I look at all the elements of the art world, the one I have the most difficulty with would be the dealers. Because often dealer acts as if the artist works for them. It's really the other way around. You know? They would be, just like in Hollywood, the movie industry would be nothing without the writers, but the writers are at the bottom of the heap. And I feel that way in the art world as well. So I'm always glad to do something outside the art world to show myself and maybe even prove to myself that I can survive even without the dealers.
Yeah.
And the art world is so trendy. It's like, I don't want to. I respect and admire anybody who takes the time to make a work of art, but so much art being made to me is just copying what somebody else did or hopping onto trends. You know, it's like so many painters now, especially among the black artists. So many painters are pretty much just Kehinde Wiley, just in a different hand. You know. And then I like art that is more than, I used to be a portrait artist on the streets in New York and at a resort in South Jersey in the 70s. But I'd like to see art that shows me something new, especially we live in a world with photography. You know, to be a photorealism was a big trend in the 70s. When I was in school in New York, that's what we learned, photorealism. My painting teacher was Chuck Close, you know, and, you know, Barker Hendricks was the man in the black community at that time doing that kind of work. But to see that rise to the top all these years later, to me, is almost diminutive. I think art is much more than portraiture. I know portraiture has a place historically, so I guess it is important to a degree. But I like blowing minds, you know. I mean, I like to freak myself out.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't. I mean, I have portraits of my grandparents that I painted, you know, when I was a kid, but this is more challenging to me. You know, this is more surprising to me.
Yeah.
So I prefer doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
But I respect those folks. But it's just trendy.
Yeah.
It's just trendy. I mean, there are photographers who were photographing people with floral backdrops, you know, all over Africa. But now that's what the painters are doing in the U.S.
Yeah, and that's funny that you say that, because that's kind of so Descending the Staircase is actually a show that is about the representation of the human figure. But I really wanted to pull that apart, right? And so think about how artists are approaching the body from a kind of different perspective. So thinking about, for instance, this section is where your piece is included, is thinking about the relationship between the body and the object. And so there aren't very many directly representational, quote unquote, pieces, but they all kind of have a sensibility of the body.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, every artist is standing on the shoulders of some other artist from the past. But you want to get high up enough on that shoulder, like a totem pole, so you're not the second guy on the shoulders of Duchamp. But you want to get as high as you can so that you have a different perspective. And that's my goal, because I'm a big Duchamp fan. You know, back in the 80s, I was reading everything about Duchamp and every book by Joseph Campbell, and this author named John Mason who wrote about the Yoruba traditions and symbols. And that fueled the irons, but I would not have taken just one of them. I need to be stacked up to get different perspective. Yeah. And this goes back to your question about the jazz. So you get to a certain point where, like, John Coltrane plays my favorite things, but he's able to improvise a beautiful solo because he knows the song. You know, he doesn't just play the melody and let it go. And I feel that art production should be that way. You know, you have to go beyond the obvious, beyond just beauty. Like, I mean, people say my work is beautiful. It's beautiful. Like, there's that seated man made out of bottles, to me, is like so spiritual because the light that it collects. But it goes beyond, you know, it's not like a one-trick pony. We got a lot of one-trick ponies in the art world today.
Yeah. Well, I'm conscious because I know that you say that Q&A is your favorite part.
It is.
So maybe we'll end there and open it up to questions. I believe there's some microphones kind of floating around.
Okay. If I just want to say, you have more slides than this.
Yes.
So they can just play in the background while we talk?
Yeah, we can just have them kind of rotate.
Let them roll. Yeah. So it might help if I said that I was an illustrator. I got out of SVA in '76 and worked as a freelance illustrator in New York. I did album covers for Savoy Records, did a couple romance novel covers, did political cartoons. But I wasn't making enough money to keep myself going, so I was able to get a job doing computer graphics. And I did that for 2 years, but in the second year I got fired and got unemployment. And because I have to twist it around for myself to deal with it, I said I got a government scholarship. And for that 1 year, I just worked so I could get a dealer. Yeah. And it turned my life around. I started out as what I called a high-tech primitive artist because I was using things I found on construction sites, like cut-off PVC pipes and galvanized steel and stuff like that. And then I became an archaeological ethnographic Dadaist, which is when I started to apply the African aesthetic to the work. And then I became a minimal maximalist, where I would take a single object, that's the minimal part, and the maximalist is work it till the end, to the max.
Take it this far. Yeah.
So that's how I got to here today.
Okay, it looks like there's a question.
Is your painting practice going to be like that you want to go back to? Oh, sorry, okay. It's a two-parter. Is your painting practice that you're going to go back to informed by your sculptural works? And are you putting that standard of making something new on yourself, like on yourself with your paintings as well?
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I haven't been painting much over the years, because I wanted to do something new. Like, I was trained as a photorealist. I was a big fan of Maxfield Parrish, illustrator. I could say a whole lot more about that. But the painting that I will do, I don't know what it will be. I want to get to the point where I can be like possessed and just do something like in a day or an hour. I don't want to give it a lot of thought. I practice by doing paintings on my sculptures. But I practice painting them more like John Sargent Singer or John Singer Sargent, painting more like that than painting the way I was taught to paint in school. I don't know if does that answer the question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, like I should just say, I've never been an abstract painter. I mean, I can abstract the human body, but I want to be abstracting more like Cy Twombly or a color field painter, But beyond that, and that's what I'm working to attract now.
Okay, it looks like we have two. I don't know who wants to go first.
Hi. I'm just curious if you could speak about what you think about your work being put next to African antiquities or ethnographic work, like at the Met, and this kind of discourse that you're trying to, of course, have a narrative with where contemporary imagery is drawn from antiquity, and the question of what is art and what is art at the time that it's made. But then to see a contemporary artist put into ethnographic wing, and so much narrative is needed to, your own personal narrative is needed to define what that means, because I don't know if a museum is capable of doing that.
Right, right.
And you've been doing it for so long, right? And that is something that I'm assuming that you've thought of so in depth, and it can seem so superfluous when
Right.
a museum just does that.
It's funny, we artists, we have the illusion of having put a lot of thought into stuff. But I strive to live just by feeling and impulse and not burden stuff down with too much thought. I would say that being in a gallery of African or tribal or so-called primitive art, of course I don't mind that at all, because those are some of the shoulders I'm standing on. Also, I'm that generation that grew up during the Black consciousness movement, where we wanted to be as African as we could, And a lot of us changed our names. And I'm from Newark too. And in Newark we had Leroy Jones, who became Amiri Baraka. He had a place called the Spirit House, and it was all about art and African culture. So I'm proud to be in places like that, among the Akan and the Yoruba, the Bundu and all the tribal stuff. Well, I know that it did in the Newark Museum of Art, because the curator started a division called Global Africa, and now she's traveling around to other museums. I think she's at a museum in Massachusetts now with the same thing, and she purchased a large bronze piece from me for the African art galleries, and it had a different thrill, because when I was a little kid at that museum, they had a piece called the Nimba from the Congo sitting right at the front door when you walk in, a huge piece. You can see it from the front door. It was a huge, beautiful piece. Now my piece is in that same location. So it's a good feeling for me to be a part of that whole conversation. I don't know what they've written about it recently, but it seems like a logical thing to me, considering that in my case, I'm like 95% Nigerian, and some of you may be too, and not even know it. But knowing that makes me feel fortunate to be accepted in that setting. Thank you.
Over here.
Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. I'm happy to be here because 15 years ago I took a job in this college in New Jersey, and they said there was going to be a public art piece put in the middle of the campus, and it was by Willie Cole. I thought, oh, Willie Cole, yeah, hey. So this was at the College of New Jersey 15 years ago. You put these pieces, and I've always wanted to know, based on everything you've talked about today, those pixels, those large balls that you placed out in the middle of the campus, how do they fit into some of the other stuff that you're doing? Because they seem so different.
Well, that's my prototype bird there, 30 horns. Well, first of all, it is one object repeated. I think there are maybe 4 there. So it satisfied my need to create the rhythm of repetition. But also, because I used to be a graphic designer, I bow to work with clients and get an understanding of what they want to see. But I guess the most obvious fit is that it is repetition, but that wouldn't be obvious to anybody who doesn't know my work so well. That piece, they said it was supposed to be a union between the School of Technology and the School of Art. So I wanted to think of a symbol that would speak about that. And I thought, well, a pixel would be that. But nobody knows what a pixel really looks like, so I decided pixel was going to be a round ball. And that pixel, in the language of my work I spoke about earlier, in this situation, became the molecule, and it's there repeated. So that's the connection.
So they were very beautiful pieces, but within a week of my arrival, the campus was in an uproar because the students were saying, what are these things that you've put out in the middle of the...
Yeah, so I got to start a dialogue, right? Yeah. Which is a good thing. Yeah, they got graffitied a bit. I've had to resurface them twice in the past 15 years.
It was like, how dare you, as the dean, put these things out in the middle of the things, and you should be fired for it. And it was like the most innocuous things I could imagine,
Yeah, some of the students thought that the school has spent their scholarship money or something on that. But that was a state project paid for by the state of New Jersey, not by the school.
Hi, Mr. Cole, right here. First of all, I went to Princeton, so I hope they commission you to put some of your art on the campus. So I plan to say, hey, can we look at Mr. Willie Cole to put some of his art on the Princeton campus? But I have a question, 3-part question. They're going to be brief.
Could you raise your hand? So
yes.
I know where you are?
Right here.
There you are. See, I can't see that far back from me with the lights and all.
I'm all 6 feet.
But all right.
That's the first I've heard that. So what is the last thing or the current thing that you are watching?
Well, I'm a news junkie. So the last thing I watched was probably CNN this morning. But in terms of so-called television entertainment, I'm watching The Boys on Prime.
Fascinating, great show. Okay, what is the current or last thing you listen to?
I was going to say my own music because I'm working with an engineer in Nashville, and he's sending me different mixes of my songs. But I think yesterday, so my assistant in Kansas City, his name is the Horn Doctor, and he is out of his mind. Every time he calls me, he says, Willie, Willie! So because I was around in the 60s, I hear that as Wooly Bully. Now, some of you may know Sam the Sham and the Pharaoh's Wooly Bully, so that's the last thing I listened to. Wooly Bully. And it's a rocking song, too.
And where can people find your music, before I ask my last question?
On YouTube. So I'm a father of 4 kids, and 2 of them were trained musicians. But when they were little kids, we had a family band. And at that time, I was studying the blues on the guitar, so I played a lot of Howlin' Wolf. And Howlin' Wolf has a song called Backdoor Man. My 10-year-old son heard it as Black Gomez. So that became the name of our family band. So if you go to YouTube under Black Gomez, you'll see a lot of my stuff. Or you go to Facebook to the Black Gomez page, and you'll see stuff.
Awesome. And last is, what's the current or last thing you read or reading?
The last thing I read was a book called Happy Money, How to Have a Better Attitude About Your Finances and Money. Mm-hmm. But I'm traveling with a book called Why Men Love Bitches.
Fascinating.
So,
didn't see that coming.
So that's, I guess you call that my current.
Okay, I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cole.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is your studio available to visit in Kansas City, or is it more of a private space?
No, we have an open house on the 1st of September, if you're in that area. But I only go there 1 week a month. But if it was scheduled, I could have my assistant meet somebody there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm over here.
Over where?
Over here.
Left.
Oh, hello.
So for the last, I don't know, 15 or 20 years, whenever I walk in a museum or a study room or something like that, and I encounter your work, I find it deeply moving even before I know it's by you. And I usually figure out it's by you after a couple minutes of standing there. And I was wondering if you feel that the objects that you create have a kind of inner energy that other people can sense, because that's something that I've always sensed personally in your work.
No, I agree with you 100%. A lot of the things that I've made, especially when I was doing a lot of stuff with the irons, I thought of them as serious ritual objects. And I thought about how you can see a little wood carving from the Dahomey tribe or from the Congo, and how do they make it feel like it had power? And it was my goal to make my pieces feel the same way. And that's one reason why I use objects that have had human contact. Because, according to our world genius, Mr. Einstein, we leave residue on everything that we encounter. So a steam iron has a residue of all your clothes, and if your hand on top of it, the water bottle has your spirit in the bottle, the bicycle has the handlebars in the seat, so human contact. And then awareness. I think maybe awareness with desire makes things happen. So if I have the awareness that these pieces have had some sort of connection with the human body, and I want to bring that out in them, then it happens. I think of like what a scientist or maybe a psychologist would call the higher faculties of the human mind. So when I'm working, I want to see each of those things have a part or input in what I'm doing and in what you see. So that's like perception. Yes, where I come in. I'm a perceptual engineer. That's my current title. Perceptual engineer. I'm creating new ways of seeing. So I'm challenging your way of seeing. But then imagination, which is being an artist. Intuition is not knowing, but just feeling. Memory is using my past without unconsciously using my past. Everything you experience is filtered through your past. So that's memory. And then the last factor would be will. And it's my will to make this all happen. So, and then I live in kind of that realm, I mean, I know, I believe I'm real, I believe I'm really here, but I question it sometime, So I believe in a multidimensional universe. I believe in time travel. I believe in the forces of nature. So because I live in that awareness 24/7, it just gets into my work. Or one I can see.
Hi, Mr. Cole. Along those same lines as you were talking about imagination and this sort of suffusing your everyday, how do you think about found objects on a day-to-day level? Do you throw away coffee cups? When you go to the grocery store, are you approaching found objects in a sort of different way? Just curious if you could talk about that.
Okay, well, I don't drink coffee, so I never throw away a coffee cup.
Okay.
I save plastic, like the produce bags. I got drawers of produce bags, I save them. They outlawed plastic shopping bags in New Jersey, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. I used to save plastic water bottles, like quarts or gallon bottles, because I make fresh juice every day when I'm home. But then, this talk about microparticles and stuff. So now I'm working to save only glass bottles and glass jars. I want to get all the plastic out of my life, and it's hard to do. My mom's a cook, so she always gives me Tupperware containers filled with food. But I'm graduating towards saving like glass jars to put stuff in. What else could I say about that? So I walk with that awareness. I don't litter anything. But again, I really don't live in the world enough to even do that kind of stuff. I live in my own world. When I'm traveling like this is when I'm engaged with people. But most time in my life, I'm alone. I'm either sitting in my yard or in my studio. And I'm not going to litter in my own yard. People do. People, I live in the rural part of New Jersey, on a one-lane road. So people drive down the road and they'll throw something out the window. But once a week, I go out there with a little picker on a stick and pick up all the litter. Recycling, I'd like to take it to another level, but I just haven't taken the time to do it yet. Because I have thousands and thousands, maybe millions of water bottles. I still have millions of steam irons, and I probably have 1 million high-heel shoes. I only have 5 bicycles left, though. And now I've got like about 100 saxophones. And it's hard to throw this stuff away. Like I haven't made a figure out of irons in probably 20 years. I had one that I've been adding on to little by little. It's now showing at the Kohler Center in Wisconsin. So I don't really count that because it lasts over a long period of time. But still, I have tons of steam irons. Am I rambling or am I answering your question?
Yeah, that answers my question.
Okay.
My question was somewhat inspired by an exhibit I saw of Alexander Calder years ago, where he would take old beer bottles or old beer cans. Friends came over and he would make a sculpture out of them and send them to him. And I wondered if you did sort of similar things with people in your life.
No, I have not sent anybody any sculpture, but I've sent drawings and cartoons. When I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a cartoonist, inspired by Walt Disney's World of Color and by Darren Stevens on Bewitched, because he worked in advertising and always had great ideas, and Robert Petrie on the Dick Van Dyke Show, because he expressed a lot of creativity. So I started writing cartoon scripts and illustrating them as a little kid. So now a friend will ask me to make a card for somebody's graduation. I'll do a little cartoon, stuff like that. But I haven't given anyone a sculpture. In my family, my family actually has a lot of my old work hanging in their homes. Just keeps them out of storage, which makes my storage fee less. So they have like a open card. Take it. If I need it, I'll take it back and give you something else. But I haven't really given away any sculpture. Actually, in the 70s, I used to carve soap into portraits, and I would give those away. But these days, I don't do that much.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Right. Maybe a couple more questions.
Hello. I actually am here because my daughter told me to come.
Okay. Tell your daughter I said thank you very much.
She teaches art, and I guess I'm accused from time to time, but that's neither here nor there. Your relationship to the irons sounds like it had something to do with your upbringing, obviously, and not being able to repair the irons. But I'm wondering, that relationship between, let's say, your mother and your family and the irons, and Is there a relationship for you between yourself and the people who help compose your art?
You mean between me and my assistants?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a relationship. There's definitely the friendship relationship,
Oh,
for
okay.
sure. In my water bottle, my water bottle studio, the assistant that I use there is also an artist, but I've known him since he was 18 years old. And he, well, let's just say, I'm like a father to him. You know, we don't declare that, but everybody that knows me says he's my son. And my sisters in Kansas City, we have a relationship just based on a love of music and an interest in higher levels of awareness and thinking. We talk about that kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah, I would think that that would be a great interconnectedness to that. I see the spirituality in your work, and I want you to know that I've had a relationship with irons for a long time too, and I have 2 irons on my stove. They're really small,
Flat
very
irons?
old irons.
Yes.
They're about this big, and you know what I use them for? My family's from the Caribbean.
You use them to...
I use them to make plátanos, to mash my plantains.
I was going to say to mash your eggplant, but
Yeah,
plátanos is just as
mash my
good.
plantains. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and there's one question in the back as well.
Okay.
Get this woman a microphone.
Thank you. Hello. I'm so excited to be here and to hear you speak in person. I had the privilege of being in a show with you in Nordstrom in New York, but you were not there.
Was that curated by Solio? Yes.
So my question for you was, how do you relate to the work that you create for commercial purposes versus the work that you do in your studio on your own for yourself?
Right. Well, most of the commercial projects, most of the solicitation comes because they saw something I did before. So they pretty much know what they want. Like when I worked with Comme des Garçons, she right away said, can you make us some headpieces for the models to wear out of shoes? And I hadn't made that before, but I've made a lot of heads out of shoes, and some of them look like they have hats on. So I didn't have to think of anything new. It was something I had done before. But for me, doing it before just means I played with it before. So I'm just playing with the shoes and see what happens. You know? But as I mentioned too earlier in this talk, though, that because of my history as a graphic designer and a freelance illustrator, you know, I kind of like, I should say respect. I kind of respect the client's wishes, but I recognize that they don't know what they want until you give them what they ask for. So like with Comme des Garçons, she said, make headpieces for the models to wear. So right away, I started making giant pieces, like, 40 shoes on somebody's head. That's a lot of weight. She got me down to 4 shoes. But, I accepted it because now I like limitations. I work with single objects. It's easy to make something if you can make it out of every and anything. But if you're limited to one object, it forces creativity. So when she limited me to 4 shoes, it became more fun for me because I was forced to make 75 pieces that were different out of 4 shoes. And I loved it.
Hey, back here right in the middle.
Right.
Yeah. First off, I wanted to say thanks for the talk, and also thanks for your story about using the government assistance as your first residency. I read about you, and I came across that story when I was back in college in Atlanta, and I was teaching. In college when I was in Atlanta, but I was teaching in my school clothes, and I was like, oh shit, this is my chance to use that unemployment like Willie Cole. So, and it jump-started my career, so I appreciate you
it's a good thing.
saying that. My question I don't really know how to form it, but it's around tutelage. And for example, you mentioned musicians. The old heads work with the young heads, and they like show them the way, they help them out, and things like that. And that's also relevant to comedians. They let the young comedians crash on their couch while they work materials, and they come to the club to witness them work the material, and they help them sharpen it. The same thing with boxers. So, as an artist, I understand that and particularly a painter, I understand that our practice is really lonesome. So I'm wondering, you in your career, one, were you formed by older artists? Did they sharpen you? How did that play a role in your personal career being developed? And then two, you are well established, and even just some bits you were saying about how you work with the business. JD mentioned how you maneuver from the studio to the business world. It's pretty seamless, and I feel like there's a lot of knowledge in you, of course, but do you feel like there's for lack of a better word, an obligation to give back, or do you find, like, how does tutelage play a role, or do you see it as something that's necessary?
I feel with every exhibition I'm giving back. But to give back to a young artist, I respond to all approaches. I get emails all the time, people asking for advice and opinion and sending me their work and things like that. I also do a lot of talks, and often they are at university museums, so they want me to look at the graduate students' work and talk about the work. So I do all that, and I never say anything bad about anybody's work, because it's such a personal thing that who am I to judge what they do, So I do give back, for sure. What else can I say about that? I feel that I'm still learning myself, too. But I feel like I'm an open book, though. Anybody that knows me knows where I'm coming from. And often I am fortunate enough to have an impact on people. So giving back deliberately and coincidentally is a everyday thing. Yep.
Let's do the last question here. You?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting you when Tom Lucas was pulling one of your prints at Lil Street. But and it was wonderful, but I have two questions regarding some of the slides that were flashing. Mm-hmm. You had the slaves with the yoke historically, but then you had them with the guitar.
Right.
Or banjo around their necks. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And then the second question is about the piano bird that flash, and just curious, do you see more pianos in your future? Thank you.
Wow. This is why I said I believe in time travel and that kind of stuff. Just this morning, I got an email offering me a baby grand piano. She said her husband passed away and she wants to give us a piano. So, it's like I seem to have opened a door for stuff, and the world is responding. This piano bird is a result of my domestic life changing. My kids are all out of the house. My wife and I decided we would go our separate ways. But the kids had a piano. We had one room that was a great room, definitely as long as the stage, but a little wider. But the piano took up a whole wall in that room. So now that the kids were gone, I said, I'll make art out of the piano. Pianos are hard to throw away. So I took it apart and made this bird. And I'm looking forward to getting more pianos for that purpose. I got so lost in the image in that part of your question, I don't recall the rest, but I know there was more. It was the one about the yokes. Oh, the yokes, yes, the yokes. Well, it's an immediate response to visual stimuli. So I had 75 guitars. They all have a hole in them. And I said, man, these look like yokes. It just, it's like overlapping images that just come together like certain things. You see them, but if you see them as if you are seeing them for the first time, it's a different kind of vision. And I had that happen with the guitar. And I think because once it filtered through my memory, it became this whole slave thing, but also became the blues. That piece is called The Birth of the Blues. I know. Currently, it is just a etching in plywood, but this is the drawing that led to it, and I plan to do the drawing as a tapestry piece. But I like it a lot. I like it a lot.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Willie, for
Thank you.
joining us.
Thank you all for being here.
And please take a moment to see the show upstairs if you haven't already. Willie's Pieces in the show as well. So, thank you.
Thank you.